Imagine wanting to be a good person so desperately that the universe grants your wish by, well, permanently breaking your mind.
Right. It's a terrifying concept.
It really is. You ask for the ability to hear the truth, and instead, you are cursed to hear every single lie ever spoken in real time, forever.
Yeah, just an absolute nightmare.
Exactly. So today, we are opening up a notoriously dense and, frankly, terrifying text. It's titled The Damnation of Truth, A History of the Scourged.
Which is such an evocative title.
Oh, it sets the tone perfectly. We're looking at a military brotherhood that was driven into the darkest, most unfathomable corners of the galaxy. And the ticker is, it wasn't driven by a thirst for power or some secret malice.
No, not at all.
It was driven by a desperate, fatal pursuit of absolute moral clarity. I mean, we all say we want the unvarnished truth, right? You want to know if you're making the right choices in life. But what if having unfiltered access to that truth was the one thing mathematically guaranteed to shatter your sanity?
It forces us to completely reevaluate the anatomy of a downfall, honestly.
How so?
Well, the traditional arc of corruption we see in this universe is, it's almost always rooted in arrogance or a hunger for dominance.
Right, like greed.
Exactly. You have commanders who think they can outsmart the warp, or demagogues who want a fiefdom of their own. But the text here documents a tragedy born of genuine empathy. The catalyst for their damnation was an obsessive, paralyzing morality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really get how they fell, we have to look at who they were before everything went wrong. The text details their origins as a loyalist Space Marine chapter called the Seekers of Truth.
Yeah.
And just looking at their operational history, the contradiction is glaring from day one. I mean, they are bound to the Ordo Hereticus. You have a chapter of Astartes, genetically engineered for total war, shackled to the paranoia of the Inquisition.
Yeah, and the primary source documents describe their mandate in terms that are deliberately meant to evoke discomfort.
Discomfort is putting it mildly, I think.
Fair enough.
Okay.
I mean, they were the militant arm brought in when an inquisitor determined a planet or a population was irreparably tainted.
So they were the cleaners.
Essentially, yes. But the orders they were executing weren't clear-cut battlefield engagements against obvious alien threats. They were orchestrating planetary purges.
Right.
We're talking about the mass execution of civilian populations, the immolation of entire governmental structures, the systematic hunting of rogue psychers hiding within billions of loyal citizens.
Which fundamentally breaks the psychology of a loyalist soldier over time. I mean, an Astartes is conditioned to feel pride in defending humanity, but if you are the one pulling the trigger on a hive city because an inquisitor told you the local governor, might be running a subterranean cult, the psychological math just doesn't add up.
It creates a massive cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. There's a passage in the text detailing a purge on a hive world called, I think it was Kethra.
Kethra, yes, that's the one.
Right, Kethra. The Seekers of Truth spent 3 months slaughtering the merchant guilds based on inquisitorial intelligence.
3 full months of just brutal, intimate violence. And the intelligence was deeply flawed.
Oh, completely.
The text highlights Kethra as a primary inflection point for their chapter master, a guy named Heroticus. They burned through millions of lives, only to discover posthumously that the corruption was isolated to a single minor subsect of the guild.
Wow.
Yeah. And the vast majority of the people they executed were entirely innocent, loyal citizens.
It's horrifying. I mean, if you're tasked with firing someone or cutting ties with a friend, you want to be 100% sure they deserve it. Now scale that up to a military brotherhood executing these brutal orders. The anxiety of accidentally killing an innocent person would be utterly paralyzing.
It really would. To carry out that level of intimate, extreme violence against your own species requires a bedrock of absolute moral certainty.
You have to believe it.
Right. You have to believe, without a millimeter of doubt, that the people you are destroying are a cancer. Because if you don't believe that, you aren't the noble avenger anymore. You are just a butcher.
It's like an internal affairs department that is forced to act on incomplete evidence. They're constantly terrified they are purging the innocent alongside the corrupt.
That's a great analogy. The text outlines how this specific breed of doubt acts as a slow-acting neurotoxin within the chapter's command structure. They relied on mortal intelligence.
And mortal intelligence in this setting is, well, garbage.
It is arguably the most polluted commodity in the galaxy. It's subject to bureaucratic infighting, petty political maneuvering, localized paranoia. The Inquisition itself operates on layers of obfuscation.
Which makes their job impossible.
Completely. So you have the Seekers of Truth striving for an absolute, philosophically pure justice, acting as blind executioners for a system shrouded in lies.
But wait, how does a chapter even function for centuries under that specific mandate?
Yeah.
Like, if the anxiety of getting it wrong is that corrosive, wouldn't they just petition to be reassigned to the front line?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, like, send us to the Ghoul Stars, let us fight something with fangs where the morality is just binary, good guys versus monsters.
But they couldn't. Their oaths bound them, and more importantly, their pride trapped them.
Their pride.
Yeah. The text emphasizes that Herodotus and his inner circle viewed their burden as a necessary martyrdom. They believed that someone had to do the dirty work of the Ordo Hereticus.
Oh, I see.
And if they handed that duty off to a lesser force, the collateral damage would be even worse. They thought their rigorous pursuit of truth made them the only ones qualified to hold the executioner's axe.
That is a terrifying rationalization. They chain themselves to the rock. It's this internalized martyrdom where they tell themselves, we have to be the ones to slaughter these potentially innocent people because if someone else does it, they might not feel as bad about it.
Exactly. It's a very dark, twisted nobility.
The text says this proximity to lethal mandates bred a desperate, clawing need for perfect clarity, which makes total sense.
It was a structural necessity for their continued existence. I mean, you cannot hold the identity of a seeker of truth while continually washing the blood of loyalists off your gauntlets.
Right.
They needed a mechanism to bypass the flawed intelligence of the Inquisition. They needed to know, objectively, who was guilty and who was innocent.
This raises an important question, though. If the burden of not knowing the truth becomes too heavy, how far would a noble leader go to find it? Because this leads directly to Herodotus's fatal decision.
It does. The text zeroes in on Herodotus retreating into the chapter's reliquary after the Kethra purge. The moral agony has officially, completely eclipsed his tactical duties.
He's just done.
He is buckling, and he attempts to solve a systemic, bureaucratic nightmare with a spiritual plea. He prays for a solution.
And not just a quick prayer.
No, the source material dictates he prayed continuously for 90 days and nights.
90 days.
Yeah. And he wasn't praying for strength or victory or better weapons. He was pleading for the cognitive ability to perceive the absolute truth, to simply know when a human being was lying so he could strip away the Inquisition's paranoia and deliver perfect justice.
He prayed to the emperor, and the response was, well, absolute silence.
The void of the emperor's silence in these historical accounts is always the breeding ground for tragedy.
It really is. But the void didn't stay empty. Sinj answered.
The chaos god of change, sorcery, and deceit.
Right, and the text describes the intervention not as a sudden demonic manifestation, but as a subtle structural shift in reality around Herodotus. Sinj granted the prayer in a manner the text calls cruelly literal.
Cruelly literal is the perfect phrasing. The brilliance of the malice here requires a deep breakdown. Herodotus conceptualized this request as an active tool.
Like a superpower.
Right. He likely envisioned an innate polygraph, an ability to stand in front of an accused cultist, ask a question, and perceive the truth of their answer. A scalpel to cut through the Ordo Hereticus's flawed dossiers.
So basically a lie detector with an off switch.
Precisely. But Sinj doesn't deal in scalpels. Sinj deals in overwhelming, cascading avalanches of data. He didn't grant the ability to selectively perceive deception. He wired the collective consciousness of the chapter directly into the ambient psychic static of every deception occurring across the material plane.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's contextualize that for you, the listener. Imagine wanting to hear a pin drop in a quiet room to find a clue. And instead, someone wires your brain directly to the loudspeakers of every bustling stock exchange, political debate, and reality TV show on Earth, all at the maximum volume forever.
It's unbearable.
It is. You didn't just get the truth, you got weaponized noise.
But surely there's a proximity limit, right? Like, if they are hearing every lie, wouldn't the sheer volume of mundane, everyday lies, a clerk cheating on a ledger or a spouse hiding an affair on a hive world 3 sectors over, just drown out the signal of any actual actionable heresy?
You'd assume so.
How do they even filter that kind of noise?
Well, horror is that they don't filter it. The text is incredibly specific on this point. There is no proximity limit and there is no cognitive filter.
Not at all.
None. The moment the gift was bestowed, it wasn't a localized awareness. It was a torrential telepathic bombardment.
That would just break a normal mind instantly. Imagine what it would be like if you could suddenly hear every lie spoken by your coworkers, your family, politicians on the news, in real time. It wouldn't bring you peace. It would completely destroy your trust in reality. Exactly. And the physical description in The Damnation of Truth of the immediate aftermath is staggering. Astartes' physiology is designed to withstand sensory extremes that would liquefy a baseline human brain.
Right, they're super soldiers.
They can stare into solar flares and process the auditory chaos of an orbital bombardment. But the psychic roar of trillions of lies crashing into their minds simultaneously bypass their physical enhancements entirely.
Because it's psychic, not physical.
Right. The text describes battle brothers collapsing in the training cages, their armor seizing up as they clawed at their own helmets, bleeding from their eyes and ears.
Just a completely weaponized information stream. Think about the sheer density of lies on a single imperial hive world.
Oh, it's unfathomable.
Right. Billions of people crammed into metal spires, all surviving through localized deceptions, bureaucratic cover-ups, and daily hypocrisies. Now multiply that by 1,000,000 worlds. Herodotus wanted the truth, and Sinish gave him the realization that the entire architecture of human civilization is glued together by falsehoods.
And this exposes the core vulnerability Tseentch exploited. The Chaos Gods do not view mortal morality as a defensive bulwark. They view it as a highly predictable, easily manipulated weakness.
Wow.
Herodotus' profound empathy, his desperate need to be a perfectly just instrument, was the very lever Tseentch pulled to shatter him.
So we have an entire chapter of Astartes who have just had their cognitive processing completely overloaded. The text makes it clear they didn't just die from this shock, right? They adapted to it.
They did.
But you can't adapt to that and remain who you were. The Seekers of Truth died in that reliquary. What walked out was something else entirely, which makes you wonder, how did this gift physically and culturally reshape these warriors?
Well, this is where we transition into the sociological and tactical reality of the Scourged. They forge a culture of madness out of sheer necessity. The text notes that the gift becomes both their eternal torment and their greatest weapon.
Okay, the concept of weaponized madness is fascinating, but how does it actually manifest on a battlefield? I mean, if you have a force of super soldiers who are constantly hearing the telepathic screams of every lie in the sector, their tactical cohesion should be non-existent.
It should be, yeah.
How do you issue an order when your lieutenant is convulsing because he can hear the enemy commander across the continent lying to his troops about reinforcements?
Well, that unpredictability is the weapon. Standard military doctrine, even the hyper-advanced tactical algorithms used by loyalist Astartes, relies on anticipating a logical opponent.
Right, you play chess.
Exactly. You predict an enemy will secure a strategic choke point or protect their supply lines. But the Scourged are no longer operating on the physical plane's tactical map. They're navigating a topographical map of deceit.
So they might completely abandon a crucial flank because the psychic noise of a nearby planetary governor broadcasting propaganda is, like, physically enraging them.
Exactly that. The text references a specific campaign on the shrine world of Celestine IV. The defending forces set up a brilliant, mathematically flawless defensive perimeter around the primary spaceport.
The obvious target.
Right, but the Scourged bypassed the spaceport entirely. They took heavy losses marching directly through a hazardous radiation zone simply to reach a secondary communications hub.
Why there?
Because the planetary command was using that hub to broadcast false casualty reports to the civilian population to keep morale up. The sheer volume of lies emanating from that transmitter physically drew the Scourged like moths to a flame. They slaughtered everyone inside and then left the planet without ever taking the spaceport.
That is wild. You just can't strategize against an enemy who is fighting a war you can't even perceive.
No, you can't.
It's like trying to play chess against someone who is hallucinating that the board is bleeding and is attacking pieces based on the voices in their head. But beyond the battlefield, their internal culture has to be equally horrific, right?
Oh, absolutely. It is entirely built around the avoidance of triggering their own curse.
Let's really unpack that. A normal society, even a brutal, hyper-militarized Astartes chapter, relies on a baseline level of social friction-reducing lies.
Of course.
Esprit de corps is often built on minor deceptions. A sergeant telling his squad they are the finest warriors he's ever seen, even if they aren't, just to boost morale. Or a brother saying he is fully combat ready when he's harboring a minor injury out of pride.
But for the Scourged, any falsehood, no matter how well-intentioned or minor, registers as a physical spike of agony in the minds of everyone around them.
So they are essentially a brotherhood of walking lie detectors who are in constant agony. It's like they're drowning in an ocean and they've decided to use the water as a weapon to drown their enemies. But the isolation must be absolute.
It's total isolation.
The text implies they exist in an environment of hypervigilant, aggressive, agonizing honesty. There is no tact. There is no diplomacy. If a battle brother asks you a question, you cannot soften the blow of the answer because softening the blow is a lie, and a lie is a literal assault on his nervous system.
And the source documents describe their current internal communications as disjointed, terrifyingly blunt, and often completely silent for long periods.
I can imagine, just silent to avoid the risk.
Yeah. They don't have chaplains delivering rousing sermons because a sermon inherently involves rhetorical embellishment. They're bound together not by loyalty anymore, but by the shared, excruciating trauma of their condition. Every other being in the galaxy is a potential source of pain simply by opening their mouth.
But my question is, how do they even function as a military unit? A standard chapter relies on an incredibly rigid, centralized hierarchy. A chapter master processes vast amounts of intelligence, manages the logistics of fleet movements, armory production and deployment, and delegates to captains.
Which requires sustained, complex communication.
Right. But if the chapter master is constantly distracted by the telepathic static of the universe, and every conversation with a subordinate is a minefield of potential psychic agony, how do they even organize a fleet? How do they keep the guns firing?
Well, they don't, at least not in any recognizable way. This brings us to the structural evolution detailed in the text, the unfounding and the reorganization into covens.
The unfounding is such a visceral term. Just for you, the listener, a founding in this lore is the sacred genesis of a chapter. It's the laying down of their heraldry, their history, their genetic legacy. To be unfounded sounds like a deliberate bureaucratic deletion.
It's worse than bureaucratic. It's a self-inflicted cultural erasure, a severing of their roots.
Real?
Yeah, the text describes this as a violently formal process. It wasn't just a slow descent into chaos. Herodicus and his captains actively dismantled the seekers of truth. They defaced their own armor, shattered their relics, and purged their own data vaults.
Wow, they erased themselves.
They did. They recognized that the noble hierarchy they relied on was incompatible with their new reality.
So it's a cellular restructuring born of cognitive necessity.
Yep.
Exactly. Centralized command is impossible when every leader and soldier is battling constant sensory overload. So they splintered. The unfounding formalized the breaking of the chapter into independent, autonomous groups called covens.
Which solves the communication bottleneck. I mean, a coven doesn't need to report back to a centralized fortress monastery. They only need to worry about their immediate surroundings and their own localized torment.
Right. The text notes that these covens operate almost entirely independently, wandering the galaxy on what is described as the hunt for deceit.
I want to spend some time on this hunt for deceit because it completely recontextualizes how they interact with the broader galaxy. If they are no longer fighting for territory or resources, their entire operational mandate is reactive.
Yes.
They are drawn to the densest concentrations of hypocrisy.
They are essentially a galactic autoimmune response to political and social corruption.
That's a great way to put it. Let's construct a scenario based on the source material to really visualize this. Imagine a highly prosperous, highly compliant imperial world.
On the surface, everything's great. The tithes are paid, the planetary defense force is well-drilled, and the governor is beloved. But beneath the surface, that governor is running a massive shadow conspiracy, siphoning funds, disappearing political rivals, and orchestrating a massive cover-up involving the local police force.
To a normal inquisitor, that world looks perfect. The lies are functioning exactly as intended to keep the gears turning smoothly.
Right. But to the Scourged, they don't need spies on the ground. They don't need orbital auspex scans. They can physically hear the dissonance of that conspiracy.
It's loud to them.
So loud. The lie of the governor's smile, the fabricated tax ledgers, the false reports filed by the corrupt police force, it all aggregates into a deafening psychic beacon. And a coven of the Scourge just follows the noise to the source. It's like they are heat-seeking missiles, but instead of heat, they lock onto political corruption.
And their arrival is never surgical. They don't launch an investigation. They make planetfall and immediately assault the source of the noise.
They just drop pod directly into the governor's spire, bypassing the military targets entirely. And the terrifying part is they aren't doing it to liberate the oppressed populace.
Wow.
They are doing it to make the noise stop. They are slaughtering the politicians and the corrupt merchants just to quiet the ringing in their own heads.
What's fascinating here is how this brings a profound philosophical weight to the text's conclusion. If the Scourged are drawn exclusively to lies, and they find themselves constantly, overwhelmingly busy in the 41st millennium, what does that say about the universe they live in?
It's a total indictment of the system. I mean, the source material states explicitly that the Scourged embody the Imperium's greatest fear. And that fear isn't a monster from the outside. It isn't a Tyranid hive fleet or an orc invasion.
No.
The greatest fear is the realization that the system's own noble intentions will inevitably lead to its downfall, that it is rotting from the inside out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text uses the phrase, a mountain of lies, and it says its foundations are rotten to the core. The Imperium justifies its horrific cruelty, its systemic oppression, and its dogmatic brutality
Right.
by claiming it is the only way to survive.
Right. We must be ruthless to keep you safe.
Exactly. That is the foundational lie.
And the Scourged's very existence proves that foundation is utterly hollow. They were driven to chaos by a sincere plea for truth, not ambition. They asked for the truth so they could serve the system perfectly. But the system was so fundamentally corrupt that perceiving the truth of it broke them. In this universe, truth is a torturer, not a liberator.
And that specific concept, truth as a torturer, is a massive subversion of standard philosophical thought. We operate on the Enlightenment ideal that enlightenment brings peace. The truth will set you free.
Right.
It implies that the underlying fabric of reality is inherently stable, and that understanding it gives you agency.
But if the underlying fabric of your civilization is built on mass exploitation, cover-ups, and daily institutionalized deceit, then seeing the truth strips away your agency completely. It just traps you in the unbearable awareness of the horror. It's the ultimate corrosive agent.
Which forces us to look at the Scourged through a very uncomfortable lens. Are they actually insane?
I love this part of the text's argument. Break that down, because calling them mad feels almost inaccurate once you understand the mechanics of their curse.
Well, clinical insanity or madness usually implies a disconnect from reality, a delusion. You are perceiving things that do not exist.
Right, like hallucinations.
But the Scourged are experiencing the exact inverse of a delusion. They are the only beings perceiving the absolute, objective reality of their universe. They hear every lie, which means they are the only ones who know the exact unvarnished shape of the truth.
So their screaming, agonizing behavior isn't a break from reality. It is the completely rational, biological response of a mortal nervous system forced to process an utterly irrational, deceitful universe.
Precisely. If you are locked in a room where the walls are made of screaming faces, covering your ears and screaming back isn't insane. It's the only logical response.
Which leads to a devastating realization about the nature of their fall. We talked about how Tsinich granted this monkey paw wish, but Tsinich didn't actually drive them mad with chaotic illusions or warp spells. All Tsinich did was remove the cognitive blindfold.
That's all it took.
Right. So what does this all mean? It means the Imperium can only survive through mass delusion. The Scourged tried to pull back the curtain, and the sheer volume of the lies holding the universe together crushed them. It wasn't the Chaos God that destroyed them. Tsinich just gave them the truth. It was the Imperium's lies that actually broke their minds.
Tsinich simply provided the conduit. The Imperium provided the ammunition.
It is an incredibly bleak conclusion, but the thematic resonance is undeniable, even outside the lore. Think about the architecture of our own lives for a second. How often do you prefer a comfortable lie over a devastating truth? We stay in broken systems, toxic relationships, or failing institutions because the lie that it's not that bad or things will improve is structurally easier to process than the terrifying truth that we need to tear everything down.
Absolutely.
We insulate our minds with thousands of minor deceptions every day just to get out of bed. The Scourged are what happens when that insulation is violently, permanently ripped away.
They are the ultimate mirror, reflecting the true cost of existing within a compromised system.
Let's pull all this together. We've traced a harrowing trajectory today. We started with the Seekers of Truth, an idealized force attempting to maintain a pure moral high ground while carrying out the paranoid, brutal mandates of the Ordo Hereticus.
Right.
We saw Herodotus buckle under the paralyzing fear of punishing the innocent and his desperate prayer for clarity.
A prayer answered by the architect of fate, weaponizing their own empathy by drowning them in the omnipresent psychic roar of every lie spoken in the galaxy.
A curse that shattered their command structure, forcing them to violently unfound their own legacy and fracture into decentralized covens. And now they wander the stars as heavily armored lie detectors, drawn to the dense psychic gravity of political and social corruption, slaughtering hypocrites just to quiet the agonizing noise in their own minds.
Ultimately exposing the fact that the Imperium they once served is a construct entirely dependent on deceit to function.
It is a phenomenal piece of grimdark philosophy.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up, I want to pivot to the broader implications. We've dissected what happened to the Scourged, but what does their fate actually imply about the rest of the galaxy?
That is exactly where the text leaves us, and it is perhaps the most chilling thought of all.
Yeah.
We've established that the Scourge fell to damnation because they were exposed to the unfiltered absolute truth of the galaxy's deceptions. Perceiving reality accurately is what broke them. If that is true, then we have to ask a terrifying question about the so-called sane loyalists who remain, the heroes of the Imperium. If hearing the truth, the actual unfiltered reality of the galaxy's deceptions, is what drives a person to chaos and damnation, then what does that say about them?
If the truth drives you to chaos, what keeps you loyal?
Exactly. It implies that sanity in this universe is entirely dependent on active participation in a delusion. The loyalists aren't the ones who have evaded corruption. They are simply the ones whose minds are protected by a thick, comfortable blanket of ignorance.
Ignorance isn't just a byproduct of the system, it is the primary survival mechanism.
Yes. The ultimate horror isn't that the Scourged fell to darkness. The ultimate horror is that in a universe built on lies, being good requires you to be fundamentally deceived.
That is a staggering concept to walk away with. The idea that clarity is fatal and delusion is a shield. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this exploration into the fatal pursuit of truth has given you as much to analyze as it has for us. Keep questioning the narratives around you, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the truth isn't a comforting light bulb. Sometimes it's a floodlight you just can't turn off. Take care, everyone.